Welcome to Stories TH. Today we dive into a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the emotional journeys we share here. Now, let's begin our story, where family secrets unfold and lives are changed forever. The painful beginning. Discovery of secrets. The story begins with Isla, a successful and loving woman, living what seemed like a perfect life. She had a strong career, a supportive family, and a wonderful relationship with her husband, William. Together, they built a life full of shared dreams, adventures, and love. Isla had no reason to doubt the stability of her marriage, until one seemingly ordinary evening when her life was turned upside down. It started with something small: William's strange behavior. He had become more distant, his mind seemingly preoccupied with something else. Isla noticed him leaving his phone face down on the kitchen table, a habit he had never had before. At first, she thought it was just stress from work or the usual ups and downs of life. But one day, as she picked up his phone to pass it to him, a text message popped up on the screen, its sender labeled as Mia. The message read, "I miss you. Can't wait to see you again." Isla froze. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the words. Her mind raced, but her body stayed motionless. She handed the phone back to William without saying a word, but the damage had already been done. A sense of unease washed over her, growing with every passing minute. The next few days were a blur. Isla couldn't shake the feeling of suspicion that had taken root in her mind. She began noticing other signs, small things at first, like William's frequent late nights at work and his increasing need for space. Then, she found more texts hidden in a folder on his phone. These messages, some romantic and others downright suggestive, came from Mia. Each one was a confirmation of the secret Isla had never imagined possible. Isla's world felt like it was crashing down around her. She was devastated, unable to comprehend how William could betray her in such a way. The pain of betrayal was unlike anything she had ever felt before, and it left her with a gnawing emptiness in her stomach. She spent hours questioning everything, every shared memory, every moment she had trusted him. It was all a lie. This discovery shook Isla to her core. She felt trapped in a whirlwind of emotions: anger, disbelief, heartbreak. How could the man she loved and trusted so completely have kept such a massive secret from her? Isla had always believed in the strength of their bond, but now everything she thought she knew about her life seemed shattered. Her mind was flooded with thoughts of what had happened and what she was supposed to do next. The decision to rise. Despite the deep hurt, Isla knew that she had to confront the situation head-on. Her first instinct was to confront William, to demand answers, but she hesitated. She needed time to process the magnitude of the betrayal, and she needed to gather the strength to face what was coming next. She spent days in silence, reflecting on the years she had spent with William, the life they had built together. One morning, Isla woke up and knew that she could no longer live in the shadows of doubt. She couldn't continue with a life that had been tainted by lies. She had to decide what kind of future she wanted for herself and her children, and what role William would play in that future. The hardest part of all was the realization that she had to make a choice between confronting the betrayal head-on or continuing in a state of denial. Isla's mind was torn. On one hand, she had the love of her children, a strong career, and her own sense of self-worth. On the other hand, she had spent years building a life with William, a man she once trusted above all else. How could she throw that all away? But the thought of living in a relationship filled with deceit was unbearable. Isla didn't want to be trapped in a marriage where the foundation of trust had been shattered. Her decision was clear in the end. She chose herself. Isla chose to stand up for her own dignity, even though it was terrifying. The road ahead was uncertain, but she realized that she couldn't stay in a marriage that no longer brought her peace. She had to find her own voice and, more importantly, reclaim her own happiness. Her decision was a difficult one, and it wasn't one made out of spite or anger. It was a decision made out of self-respect and a desire to rebuild her life, with or without William. Isla knew that the path ahead would not be easy. She would face hard questions, painful confrontations, and maybe even a feeling of loneliness. But she had decided that her future would no longer be dictated by someone else's choices. Isla stood up to her fears, and while the pain of betrayal still stung, she was ready to face the truth. The first step in her journey was not about making others understand her decision, but understanding it herself. She was choosing herself not out of revenge, but out of a desire to live a life full of truth, respect, and love. With that, Isla began the difficult yet necessary process of rebuilding her life. She wasn't sure where the road would take her, but she knew that the decision to rise above the hurt was the first step towards healing. Life turned upside down, rising tension. As Isla continued to grapple with a painful discovery about William, the tension in their home grew unbearable. Her heart was heavy, her mind clouded with confusion, and yet, one thing became clear: William was not willing to acknowledge the truth. He acted as though nothing had changed, his denial so deep it felt like he was living in a different reality. Every time Isla tried to bring up the affair, he quickly brushed it off, turning the conversation into something trivial or completely dismissing her concerns with an excuse. "You're just overthinking things," he would say, dismissing her hurt as an overreaction. But Isla couldn't ignore the weight of the lies and the gnawing feeling that had settled deep in her heart. She had discovered the messages, the secret meetings, and now she felt like a stranger in her own home. Yet, despite her pain, Isla still questioned whether she should fight for her marriage. She had always believed that a relationship was built on trust, but now the very foundation of her life was cracked. Could she continue to stay with someone who refused to even acknowledge the betrayal? Each day, Isla would go through the motions taking care of the kids, making dinner, and pretending that everything was fine, but inside, she felt like she was suffocating. There were moments of intense silence between her and William, moments where she would catch him looking at her with guilt in his eyes, but never speaking of it. She knew he was struggling too, but it only made her situation worse. His refusal to talk made Isla feel isolated in her own home. And then there was Eleanor, William's mother, the woman who had always been the epitome of grace and poise, the woman who had been like a second mother to Isla, was now contributing to the tension. Eleanor, despite her loving facade, began to interfere in their relationship more than ever. She would show up unannounced, offering unsolicited advice, or even questioning Isla about her feelings toward William. It was clear that she didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. Eleanor seemed to think that Isla was simply upset over a temporary misunderstanding, urging her to give William some space to work things out. At first, Isla tried to be polite, playing along for the sake of peace. But Eleanor's words felt more like a subtle attack than help. She didn't understand. How could she? Eleanor had always been the perfect mother-in-law, never once crossing boundaries or making Isla feel uncomfortable until now. Now, she was the voice of denial, acting as if the affair was a small issue that could be swept under the rug. Isla began to feel like she was trapped in a constant cycle of emotional manipulation, with no one willing to acknowledge her pain. As days went by, the once comforting presence of William's mother began to feel more like a source of oppression. In the midst of this turmoil, Isla was faced with the hardest question of all. Should she stay and try to make it work for the sake of her family? Her children needed a stable home, and William was the father they adored. But was it worth enduring the ongoing lies, the tension, and the heartbreak just to keep the family intact? The struggle within Isla was overwhelming. She knew that the love she once had for William was still there, but it was buried under the weight of his betrayal and the overwhelming silence that followed. Betrayal and silence. As Isla tried to navigate this painful chapter of her life, the ultimate betrayal came in the form of a shocking revelation. It wasn't just William who had lied to her. Eleanor, his mother, had known about the affair all along. Isla found this out one evening when she overheard a conversation between William and his mother. She had been eavesdropping unintentionally, but what she overheard shattered her already fragile sense of trust. Eleanor, in a calm and measured voice, had said, "William, you need to make this right. Isla doesn't deserve this. But you know as well as I do, she's not going anywhere." The words hit Isla like a punch to the gut. Eleanor had known. She had known everything about the affair, and yet she had never said a word to her. The woman who had always treated her like family, who had been a second mother to her, had been silent. It wasn't just a matter of silence, it was complicity. Eleanor had chosen to protect her son's image rather than stand up for Isla, who had trusted her with every aspect of her life. Isla's heart broke all over again. This betrayal wasn't just about William anymore. It was about the two people she had loved and trusted most in the world. Both of them had kept this secret from her. How could she have been so blind to the truth? She felt completely abandoned. The realization that William's mother had known the truth all along, but had done nothing to help or even acknowledge her pain, left Isla with a deep sense of isolation. She confronted William that night, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" she demanded. William, as always, was defensive, his eyes filled with guilt but also anger. "I didn't want to hurt you," he muttered. "I thought if I kept it hidden, we could move past it." But Isla couldn't understand. How could he have thought that? How could he have hidden something so important from her? And how could Eleanor, who was like a second mother, have stood by silently, choosing to protect her son rather than help her? Eleanor, when confronted, only shrugged it off. "I didn't want to make things worse. You've always been so strong, Isla. I thought you could handle it." Her words were cold and dismissive, as though Isla's pain was an inconvenience to her. This response cut Isla to the core. How could she have been so blind to what was really going on? The woman she had trusted, confided in, and turned to for guidance had betrayed her just as much as William had. In that moment, Isla realized that the family she had fought so hard to protect was no longer the family she had once known. The silence and betrayal from William and Eleanor had left scars that would take a long time to heal. As she stood there, the weight of the truth pressing down on her, Isla felt a new determination rise within her. She could no longer keep living in this space of doubt and betrayal. It was time to make a choice not for William, not for Eleanor, but for herself. Isla's world had been flipped upside down, and she was standing at a crossroads, forced to decide what kind of life she wanted to lead. The silence and betrayal had shown her the limits of trust, but they had also shown her the strength within herself to rise above the pain. Whether she stayed or left, one thing was clear. Isla would no longer allow herself to be a silent victim in her own life. She had the power to choose her own path, and that was the first step toward reclaiming her life from the shadows of betrayal. Freedom and self-discovery. Confronting herself. After making the difficult decision to step away from William and their troubled marriage, Isla was left in a sea of confusion and self-doubt. But as the days passed, she realized that her decision, though painful, was also liberating. The emotional weight of her marriage had been suffocating, leaving little room for her own identity, her passions, and her desires. With the space to think and breathe, Isla started to see herself in a new light. She was no longer just a wife and mother. She was Isla, an individual with her own hopes, dreams, and needs. To begin her journey of self-discovery, Isla enrolled in a new course at a local college, something she had always dreamed of but had never had the chance to pursue. It was a course in writing, a field she had been passionate about since her youth, but had set aside in favor of family and obligations. As she attended her first class, she could feel the spark of excitement returning to her, something that had been dormant for so long. The challenge of writing, the thrill of expressing her thoughts and emotions, brought a sense of fulfillment that Isla had forgotten she was capable of. It was as if she had reawakened a part of herself that had been buried under years of sacrifice. Isla threw herself into the course with enthusiasm, and soon she began to see the progress she had made. The words flowed more easily, and the stories she had once longed to tell started to form in her mind. Writing became her sanctuary, a place where she could escape from the pain and the judgment of the world. She poured her heart into her essays, stories, and poetry, discovering that writing was not only a form of self-expression, but also a powerful tool for healing. In addition to her creative pursuits, Isla also focused on rebuilding her career. Before marrying William, she had been a successful interior designer, but over the years, she had put her career on hold to raise a family. Now, with a new sense of purpose and independence, Isla re-entered the workforce. She started taking on small projects at first, gradually rebuilding her portfolio and her confidence. The satisfaction she felt from designing beautiful spaces and seeing her clients' reactions reminded her of her own strength and capability. The woman she had become was not the person she had been years ago. She was more focused, more self-assured, and more willing to take risks for the sake of her happiness. While Isla reveled in the rediscovery of her passions and career, she also had to confront the difficult reality of her social relationships. William's absence left a void, and Isla had to adjust to the loneliness that came with being on her own. She was no longer part of the familiar routine of family gatherings, outings, and shared moments with friends who were once her circle. Some of her friends had distanced themselves, unsure of how to support her, while others questioned her decision to leave William. The social isolation was difficult to bear at times, but it also gave Isla the opportunity to reflect on the relationships that truly mattered. She learned to value the people who respected her boundaries, who understood her need for personal growth, and who supported her in her journey of self-discovery. As Isla confronted her own identity, she realized that the most important relationship she needed to cultivate was the one with herself. She had spent so many years caring for others, first her family, then William, that she had neglected her own emotional well-being. But now, she was learning to love and prioritize herself. She began to focus on self-care, whether that meant taking long walks in nature, enjoying a cup of coffee in solitude, or simply allowing herself to rest. She forgave herself for the years of self-neglect and began to rebuild her inner strength. New beginnings. Although Isla's journey of self-discovery was liberating, it was not without its challenges. The world around her had changed, and with it, her relationships with her family and the expectations placed on her. Her family was supportive, but they were also worried about her. Isla had always been the strong one in the family, the one who held everything together. Seeing her now, unsure of the future and struggling to redefine herself, caused concern. There were moments when she felt like an outsider in her own family, especially when well-meaning relatives would comment on her decision to leave William. "You should have fought harder for your marriage," they would say. "You'll be okay, but think of the kids." While their words came from a place of love, they also reflected the societal pressure Isla had faced for years to keep her family intact, no matter the cost. Isla had to learn how to silence the voices of others, to block out the well-intentioned but often misguided advice, and to stay focused on her own path. She understood that her decision was not just about herself, it was about her children, too. She wanted to show them that it was okay to make difficult decisions, that it was okay to choose happiness over comfort. Her children were her world, and though they missed their father, Isla knew that they needed to see their mother stand strong, unapologetic for the choices she was making. She spent more time with them, going on trips, attending their school events, and just being present in their lives. Through this, Isla began to realize that the love and bond she shared with her children were far more important than the expectations of society or even her family. She was determined to give them a life that was full of joy and love, even if it meant creating a new reality without William. It wasn't an easy task, but with each passing day, Isla found more strength in her role as a mother. Isla also began to explore new opportunities outside her work and family life. She joined a local group of women who were also navigating life's challenges, and through their shared experiences, she discovered the power of community. These women, from various walks of life, all had their own stories of loss, heartbreak, and recovery, and their stories helped Isla feel less alone. She found that by sharing her struggles and learning from others, she could continue to grow and evolve. It was in these moments of vulnerability and connection that Isla began to heal in ways she never thought possible. Through it all, Isla's sense of self grew stronger. She had broken free from the constraints of her past life, and though she had no clear idea of what the future would hold, she was excited for what was to come. Every new day brought with it the possibility of new experiences, new relationships, and a deeper understanding of who she truly was. She had been through the storm, but now she was ready to embrace the calm that followed, knowing that she was capable of creating a new life on her own terms. Isla's journey was far from over, but she had already come a long way. She had faced the deepest parts of herself, and in doing so, had learned to embrace her own strength and resilience. The future was uncertain, but one thing was for sure: Isla was no longer afraid of living her life authentically. The return of secrets, love, and change. Months passed, and Isla began to settle into her new life. She had made tremendous strides in healing, rediscovering herself, and finding peace within her own identity. But the shadows of the past, particularly William, were never too far behind. The pain of betrayal lingered, and the once clear path to self-discovery now had occasional moments of doubt. William, however, was determined to reclaim what he had lost. He reached out to Isla, initially through simple messages, but as the days turned into weeks, he became more persistent. He apologized profusely for his actions and promised that he had changed. He pleaded with her to give him another chance, to trust him once more. At first, Isla resisted. The betrayal had cut deep, and despite all his promises, Isla couldn't forget the hurt she had felt. William began to show up at Isla's door, not with grand gestures, but with quiet sincerity. He took small, genuine actions to prove his commitment, fixing things around her home that had broken, helping with the kids, and being there when she needed him. Each time she saw him, Isla could feel the weight of the past trying to pull her back, but she also noticed something different in him. The man who once seemed oblivious to the pain he caused now seemed genuinely remorseful. But Isla was no fool. She had learned the hard way that words alone were not enough to heal the wounds of betrayal. Her heart ached with every reminder of what they had lost, and while a part of her longed for the love they once shared, another part of her feared being hurt again. William's attempts to rekindle their relationship made Isla feel torn between hope and caution. She was afraid of letting him back into her heart, knowing that the same trust she had once given him was now irrevocably broken. One evening, as she sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, William came to her again. His eyes were filled with regret, his voice soft and sincere as he said, "Isla, I know I've failed you in every way possible, but I'm asking you to take a chance on me again. I want to be the man you once believed I could be. I want to be the person you deserve." Isla stared into his eyes, searching for any sign of the man she had once loved. For a moment, she was tempted to say yes, to embrace the man standing before her with open arms. But a voice inside her whispered caution, reminding her of the promises he had broken before. She felt the weight of her own emotional scars and the uncertainty that came with trusting him again. She needed time to heal, time to reflect, and time to decide whether or not she was willing to reopen that door. Isla's love for him hadn't completely faded, but she had grown stronger, and she wasn't sure if she could afford to go back to the person she had once been. What if the same cycle of pain and disappointment repeated itself? What if he failed her once again? Her emotions were a storm of confusion, and the decision weighed heavily on her heart. The truth slowly unfolds. As Isla continued to grapple with the uncertainty of her relationship with William, new truths began to surface, truths that, in many ways, cast a shadow over the decision she had to make. William's past actions were not the only thing she needed to contend with. The more Isla dug into the mystery of their relationship, the more she realized that there were things she hadn't been told, things that had been hidden from her for years. It started with small inconsistencies. Isla began to notice that some of William's stories didn't quite add up, especially regarding his time away from her during the months of their separation. She found discrepancies between the version of events he had shared and what she was now learning from mutual friends and even family members. Slowly, Isla began to piece together a bigger picture, one that wasn't just about his affair, but about a whole set of secrets he had kept from her. The web of lies began to unravel as she uncovered more details about his personal life, his dealings with his family, and the things he had hidden in order to maintain his perfect image. One evening, after finding an old letter in William's desk drawer, Isla confronted him about what she had discovered. "William, why didn't you tell me the truth? Why did you keep all of this from me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. The letter she had found was a revelation. It was written by someone she didn't know, but the words were clear. William had known about some significant financial issues long before they became public. He had hidden it from her, protecting his reputation at the expense of their relationship. William looked at her, his face a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. "I didn't want to burden you with it, Isla. I wanted to protect you, protect our family. I thought I could fix everything on my own." Isla's heart sank. She had always believed in their partnership, in the idea that they were a team, that they shared everything, the good and the bad. But now, it seemed as though he had been living in a world of his own, making decisions that affected both of them without consulting her. His desire to protect her had, ironically, been the very thing that caused the most harm. As more truths came to light, Isla's trust in William continued to erode. She discovered that not only had he been hiding financial troubles, but he had also made questionable business decisions that impacted their future. He had concealed these mistakes, hoping they would never surface. The trust they had once shared was shattered, replaced by a growing sense of betrayal. Isla realized that the relationship she had been fighting to rebuild was built on a foundation of secrets and lies. She no longer recognized the man who had once promised to love and cherish her. The revelations about his past made her question everything: his actions, his motivations, and his commitment to their marriage. But Isla also knew that she couldn't keep living in the shadow of deception. She had come so far in her journey of self-discovery, and while it was difficult to accept the truth about William, she knew that she deserved honesty and transparency. The weight of the past was becoming too heavy to bear, and the path to healing could not continue until the truth was fully exposed. As the layers of William's secrets slowly unraveled, Isla faced a decision that no one should ever have to make. Could she forgive a man who had betrayed her trust on so many levels, or was it time to walk away for good? The truth had been revealed, and now it was up to her to decide how to move forward with the pieces of her life that remained. The decision to make. A pivotal moment. It was a Sunday afternoon when Isla found herself once again standing at the threshold of a life she had tried so hard to rebuild. The invitation had come unexpectedly, a gentle request from William's mother, Eleanor, to join the family for dinner at their estate. Isla had always prided herself on maintaining her dignity, even after everything had happened. But now, with the latest revelations and the weight of so many unspoken truths, this dinner felt like an ordeal she could not escape. The tension in the air was palpable, and she knew it wouldn't be long before the unresolved issues of her marriage were laid bare once more. As she entered the grand dining room, Isla felt like a stranger in a place she once considered home. The room was lavishly set, with elegant china and crystal glasses gleaming under the chandelier. Yet, all she could see were the shadows of the past, reminders of the betrayal that had rocked her to her core. William greeted her with a warm smile, but Isla knew it was not the same smile she had once cherished. There was a sense of distance in his eyes, a look that spoke of regret and desperation, yet also of helplessness. He was trying to fix things, but Isla was unsure whether that was possible anymore. The dinner began with small talk, compliments about the food, vague inquiries about Isla's well-being, but beneath it all, there was an unspoken tension. William's family, especially his mother, Eleanor, seemed to be scrutinizing Isla's every move. Eleanor had always been kind to her, but now there was a sense of underlying expectation in her gaze. It was as if everyone in the room was waiting for Isla to make a decision. Isla's mind raced as she listened to the conversations around her. She couldn't help but think about the past, the love she once had for William, the future they had planned together, and how easily it had all been shattered. She could feel the weight of her marriage pressing down on her, like an invisible hand tightening around her chest. Was this the life she wanted? A life of secrecy, pain, and betrayal? Or was there another way to move forward? The thought of leaving was overwhelming, but the thought of staying was equally unbearable. Her heart was torn between two extremes: the love for her family and the crushing reality of what that love had become. William's actions had hurt her in ways she never thought possible, yet she had spent years building a life together. Could she throw that all away? Was it possible to forgive him and rebuild what they once had? Or was it time for her to finally acknowledge that some relationships were beyond repair and that the only way to preserve her self-worth was to leave him behind? As Isla gazed around the table, she saw the faces of the people who had been part of her life for so long. They were all looking at her, waiting for her to make the next move, to decide what the future would look like for her and William. But Isla knew that no matter what decision she made, it would not only affect her, but would ripple through the entire family. She would hurt William, and perhaps even drive a wedge between herself and the family she had once embraced. But was it worth the sacrifice? Was her happiness worth more than her loyalty to a family that had never truly been honest with her? The minutes dragged on, each second more painful than the last. The room felt suffocating, and Isla's mind raced with conflicting emotions. At that moment, she realized that there would never be a perfect time to make this decision. She couldn't wait for the right answer to fall in her lap. The decision had to come from within her, from the deepest part of her heart. The resolution. That evening, after the dinner ended and the guests had left, Isla sat alone in her room, facing a mirror that reflected a woman she barely recognized. Her face was pale, her eyes tired, and her heart heavy. She had been through so much betrayal, pain, and loss, but now she had to make the hardest decision of all, whether to continue this life or walk away from everything she had built. Isla closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to center herself. The years she had spent with William flashed before her. The laughter, the love, the dreams of a future they would share. But now, those dreams felt like ghosts haunting reminders of time that no longer existed. She could hear William's voice in her mind, pleading with her to give him another chance. But was that enough? Could she ever truly trust him again? Could she allow herself to be vulnerable to someone who had so deeply betrayed her trust? The more she thought about it, the clearer her mind became. Isla knew that in order to move forward, she had to let go of the past. She had to forgive herself for staying too long in a situation that was damaging to her mental and emotional well-being. She had to choose herself. She had always believed in the idea of family, of loyalty, but loyalty should never come at the cost of one's self-respect. She had spent so much of her life putting others first, William, his family, their future, but in doing so, she had neglected herself. She had lost sight of who she was outside of the role she played as wife and mother. Isla knew that for her to heal, for her to truly reclaim her life, she had to make a choice that was painful but necessary. With a final, resolute sigh, Isla made the decision. She would not remain in this marriage. She would not live in a house filled with lies and deceit. She could no longer allow William or anyone else to dictate her happiness. It was time for her to reclaim her independence and find peace on her own terms. The next morning, Isla sat down with William. Her heart was heavy, but her voice was steady as she spoke. "I've made my decision, William. I can't continue living like this. I need to walk away for my own sake." She saw the shock in his eyes, the hurt, but also the understanding that he had known this day was coming. "I will always care for you, but I can't stay in a marriage where trust has been shattered. I need to find myself again. I need to live a life that is true to who I am." William was silent, his face pale as he took in her words. His lips parted as if to say something, but no words came. Isla stood up, her heart breaking, but also feeling lighter with every step she took away from him. She had made her choice. It was time to heal, to move forward, and to embrace the life she had always deserved. As she walked away from the life she had known, Isla knew that the road ahead would not be easy. But she also knew that it was the only road that would lead her to true happiness and fulfillment. She was finally free to choose her own path, to live for herself, and to reclaim the strength that had always been within her. The truth unfolds. The final decision. After taking time to heal and rebuild her life, Isla had reached a point where she could no longer ignore the elephant in the room. She had spent months reflecting on her marriage, the betrayal, and the deep scars that had been left behind. But now, she was ready to confront the truth about herself, her marriage, and the people who had hurt her. The time had come to face the painful reality and deal with the relationships that had been damaged. She had taken long walks in the quiet of the morning, meditated, and journaled about her feelings. It was in these moments of solitude that Isla realized how far she had come since that devastating discovery. She no longer felt like a woman broken by the weight of her husband's infidelity. She had found strength in herself, in her own voice, and in the promise she had made to herself to never allow anyone to disrespect her again. With this newfound clarity, Isla decided that it was time to take the next step. She could no longer stay silent, hoping that things would get better on their own. She had given William multiple chances, and each time, he had failed her. It was clear to Isla now that staying in a relationship where she felt unappreciated and unloved was not an option. She was worth more than that. Isla called for a meeting with William, and the tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't just the weight of the betrayal she had experienced that made this conversation so difficult. It was the realization that her life, her future, depended on the words she would say in the next few moments. It was time to stop running from the truth, time to stop pretending like everything could go back to normal. The damage had been done, and the only way to move forward was to address it head-on. When William entered the room, Isla stood up and looked at him with a steady gaze. There were no tears left in her eyes. Her heart had been shattered, but now it was stronger. She had spent so much time trying to make sense of everything, but now she knew exactly what she had to say. "William, we need to talk," Isla began, her voice calm but firm. "I've spent a long time thinking about what happened between us, and I've come to the conclusion that I can no longer continue in this relationship as it is. You broke my trust, and I can't pretend like everything is fine anymore." William's face turned pale, and for the first time, Isla saw a hint of guilt in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but Isla raised a hand to silence him. "I'm not here to hear your excuses, William. I'm not here to hear promises that you'll change. I need you to understand that this isn't just about you. It's about my life, my happiness. And I can no longer allow myself to be in a relationship where I feel disrespected and unloved. You had your chances, and you failed." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a brief moment, Isla saw the pain in William's eyes. But she could no longer be moved by it. She had spent too long giving him the benefit of the doubt, hoping that he would change. But now, Isla was no longer that woman. She was stronger, and she knew that she deserved more than what William had given her. "I'm asking you to stop this," Isla continued, her voice steady. "I'm asking you to stop disrespecting me, to stop making me feel like I am not enough. And I'm asking you to stop pretending that everything is okay when it clearly isn't. I am done." There was a long silence between them, and Isla could see the weight of her words settling in. William seemed to shrink under the intensity of the moment, but he still couldn't bring himself to fully acknowledge the damage he had caused. Instead, he looked at her with pleading eyes, but Isla stood her ground. "You may think that I'm being unfair," Isla said, her voice almost a whisper now. "But I am choosing myself. I am choosing peace over pain, and I am choosing freedom over the shackles of a broken relationship." The bitter reality. Despite Isla's clarity and determination, the road ahead was not as easy as she had hoped. William, though understanding on some level, could not fully grasp the magnitude of what he had done. He tried to apologize, but his words felt hollow, like a man who had been caught but had yet to learn his lesson. He pleaded with Isla to stay, to give him another chance, but Isla knew that forgiveness could no longer heal the wounds he had inflicted. The hardest part for Isla, however, was not dealing with William's pleas, it was facing the reality of what her life had become. After she made her decision, she hoped for some relief, a sense of peace. But instead, she found herself feeling isolated and alone. She had cut ties with the life she had known, and though it was the right decision, the transition was far from easy. The pain of her decision lingered, especially when she saw how William's family reacted. They were disappointed in her, some even angry, for choosing to leave William behind. They had always considered her part of the family, and now Isla felt like an outsider. She had hoped for support, but instead, she found herself further isolated from the people she had once called family. Her phone rarely rang, and when it did, it was often filled with messages from people who didn't truly understand the depth of her pain. Her friends, while supportive, had their own lives to live, and Isla didn't want to burden them with her heartbreak. As the days went by, Isla realized that, despite her decision, she still carried a sense of loneliness with her. The hardest moments were the quiet ones, when she sat alone in her apartment, thinking about the life she had left behind. She thought of the dreams she once had, of the house she and William had planned to build, and of the future that now seemed so distant. But in those moments, Isla also reminded herself that she was stronger now. She had made the decision for herself, and though it was painful, she knew it was the only way forward. She thought about the women who had been in her position, who had stayed too long in relationships that drained them, who had sacrificed their happiness for the sake of others. Isla realized that she could not be one of them. She had to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it was. Despite the sense of isolation, Isla began to rebuild. She spent time focusing on her career, rediscovering her passions, and taking small steps toward healing. She realized that she was still worthy of love, of happiness, and that she did not need anyone else to validate her. It would take time, but Isla knew that she was on the right path. As she looked out the window one evening, watching the sunset cast a warm glow over the city, Isla knew that her journey was just beginning. The pain would not vanish overnight, but the future was hers to shape, and she would no longer allow anyone to take that power away from her. She was choosing herself, and for the first time in a long time, Isla felt like she was truly free. Reflection and life assessment. The past and the memories. As Isla sat in her quiet apartment one evening, the soft glow of the sunset casting its golden rays across the room, she couldn't help but think back to the life she had left behind. The memories flooded her like an overwhelming tide, each one carrying its own weight, its own significance. The smiles, the laughter, the promises that had been made, all of them now felt like echoes from another time, a time when things seemed so much simpler. William had once been the center of her world. She remembered their early days together, the way his eyes sparkled with passion, the way he always made her feel like she was the most important person in the room. There had been moments of pure joy, moments when Isla believed that they were invincible, that their love was something that could withstand anything. She had felt safe in his arms, like nothing in the world could harm her. But then the cracks had started to show. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't obvious. It started with small things, the late nights at the office, the missed calls, the subtle distance between them. Isla had brushed them off, convincing herself that it was all just part of the ebb and flow of life. But deep down, she had felt the growing unease, the sinking feeling that something wasn't quite right. The signs were there, but Isla had chosen to ignore them, hoping that love would be enough to keep them together. As Isla reflected on these moments, she couldn't help but wonder, what if she had made different choices? What if, instead of turning a blind eye, she had confronted William sooner? Could things have turned out differently? Could they have salvaged their marriage? These thoughts tormented her, but Isla knew better than to dwell on them for too long. The past was behind her, and she couldn't change it. What mattered now was moving forward, even if it meant leaving the past behind. She thought about the good times, the vacations they had taken together, the way they had laughed until their sides ached, and the quiet nights spent curled up on the couch, just enjoying each other's company. There had been love, real love, and it was hard to reconcile those memories with the betrayal that had come later. But Isla knew that life wasn't just about the good times. It was about how you navigated the challenges and the tough moments. And in those tough moments, she had learned that she could survive without William, that she could stand on her own 2 feet and find happiness again. Her mind kept returning to the moments of realization, the nights she had spent awake, unable to sleep, wondering where it had all gone wrong. The truth had come to her in waves, slowly at first, and then all at once. William's affair had been a betrayal that Isla couldn't ignore, no matter how much she had wanted to. It shattered the trust between them, leaving a void that Isla knew would never truly be filled. And yet, despite the pain, she was no longer angry. The anger had faded over time, replaced by a quiet sense of resolve. She had made her choice, and she had to live with it. Isla's mind also wandered to her decision to leave. At first, it had felt like a betrayal to herself to walk away from everything she had known, to leave the life she had built with William. But now, as she reflected on that decision, Isla realized that it had been the bravest thing she had ever done. She had chosen herself, and though it had been painful, it was the only way forward. Finding trust again. Isla had learned the hard way that trust was not something that could be easily rebuilt. After everything that had happened with William, she had found it difficult to open her heart to anyone, even to herself. Trust had always been a cornerstone of her life. It was the foundation of her marriage, her relationships, and her sense of security. But when that trust was shattered, Isla was left with a deep sense of uncertainty, questioning whether she would ever be able to trust anyone again. But as time went on, Isla began to heal. She realized that while she had been hurt, she was not broken. She had the power to heal herself, to rebuild the trust that she had lost not just in others, but in herself. Isla took small steps to reconnect with the people around her. She rekindled friendships that had been neglected during her marriage, reconnecting with old friends who had always been there for her. They reminded her that love and trust didn't always have to come from a romantic relationship. They could be found in the bonds of friendship, in the shared experiences and laughter that made life worthwhile. Isla also started exploring new relationships, though not in the way she had once imagined. She was cautious, aware that the pain of betrayal was still fresh, and that rushing into another relationship could only lead to more heartache. But as she began to trust herself again, she found that she was able to open her heart in small ways. She started dating again, though slowly, allowing herself to rediscover what it felt like to be loved without the weight of past betrayals hanging over her. Through this process, Isla learned that trust wasn't just about giving it to others. It was about giving it to herself. She learned to trust her instincts again, to believe that she could make the right decisions for her own happiness. And as she navigated the world of dating and new relationships, she discovered that the healing process was not linear. There were ups and downs, moments of doubt, and moments of hope. But with each step, Isla found herself becoming stronger and more confident in her ability to love again. But trust wasn't just something she could find in others. It was also about accepting herself, imperfections and all. Isla had spent so many years questioning herself, wondering if she was good enough, wondering if she had done something wrong to deserve the pain she had endured. But now, she understood that she was worthy of love, that she was worthy of happiness, no matter what had happened in the past. And so, as Isla continued her journey of healing, she realized that the process of rebuilding trust was a long one. It wasn't something that could be rushed or forced. It had to happen naturally, in its own time. And she was okay with that. For the first time in a long time, Isla felt like she was moving forward, not because she was forgetting the past, but because she was learning to accept it as part of her journey. The pain would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had found peace, and in that peace, she had found the ability to trust once again. Isla smiled softly to herself, knowing that while the road ahead would not always be easy, she was ready for whatever came next. She was ready to trust again, to love again, and to live fully with all the lessons she had learned from her past. A new portrait of family, rebuilding the family. Isla sat quietly on the couch, her hands gently holding a cup of tea. The once chaotic and painful thoughts about her marriage with William were now becoming more peaceful. The road to rebuilding their relationship had not been easy, nor was it instantaneous. It had taken time, months of reflection, therapy, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But here they were, sitting together in the same room, not as they once were, but as two people who had learned from their past and were ready to build something new, something stronger. William had changed. The arrogance that Isla once saw in him had been replaced with a deep sense of humility. He was no longer the man who took her for granted, but a person who had seen the depth of her pain and was willing to make amends. There were no quick fixes, no promises that everything would be perfect. But for the first time in a long while, Isla believed that they could build something together based on mutual respect, trust, and honesty. The process of rebuilding their family wasn't just about them, it was about their children, too. Isla realized that she had neglected to truly notice how much their children had been affected by the turmoil in their home. Their children had witnessed the cracks in their marriage, and although they hadn't said anything, Isla knew that they had sensed the tension. Now, it was up to her and William to model what a healthy, loving relationship looked like, not just for themselves, but for their children. They began to make small changes in their daily routines, focusing more on communication and understanding. The simple acts of spending time together, sharing their thoughts, and listening to each other's concerns were becoming the new foundation of their family. They started doing family activities, game nights, hikes, or just watching movies together at home. While these small actions couldn't undo the past, they helped heal the wounds that had been inflicted, slowly stitching their family back together. Isla and William also realized that this new version of their family wouldn't be like it was before. It wasn't about trying to return to the past, but about creating a future built on shared experiences and new memories. Their children were also beginning to see the changes, feeling the difference in the atmosphere at home. Isla felt a sense of hope slowly returning as they took each day at a time, focusing not on the mistakes of the past, but on the possibilities that lay ahead. As the weeks passed, Isla could see that William was more present, more engaged with the children, and more involved in their shared life. He had stopped avoiding difficult conversations and began taking full responsibility for his actions. There were still moments of tension, but they had learned to face those moments with patience and grace. Every day, they worked on rebuilding not just their relationship, but their family as a whole. The transformation wasn't quick, nor was it without setbacks. Some days were easier than others, but Isla was beginning to believe that they were on the right path. The most important thing was that they were both committed to this new journey together. They were building a family based not on perfection, but on honesty, respect, and shared love. Accepting reality. While rebuilding her family and her marriage was a hopeful journey, Isla also realized that it didn't come without its complexities. She had learned over time that life wasn't about achieving perfection, it was about accepting imperfection and making the best of what you had. The road ahead would never be entirely smooth. There would be challenges, there would be moments of doubt, and there would be times when Isla wondered if she was truly on the right path. Isla's acceptance of reality was not about giving up hope or resigning herself to a life of mediocrity. Instead, it was about embracing the reality of her situation, the fact that no family, no relationship, no person could be perfect. She came to understand that the imperfections were what made life beautiful. The pain, the lessons, and the growth that came from overcoming obstacles were what shaped her into the person she was becoming. She realized that the key to true happiness was not found in a flawless marriage or an ideal family, but in finding peace within herself. Isla had spent years striving for perfection, for a perfect family, for the perfect life. But now, she understood that perfection didn't exist. What mattered was how you dealt with the imperfections, how you navigated life's challenges with grace and dignity. Isla started to embrace the fact that happiness wasn't a destination, it was a journey. The small moments of joy, spending time with her children, sharing a quiet evening with William, or simply enjoying a peaceful walk in the park became more meaningful. She no longer felt the need to chase after an idealized version of happiness. Instead, she learned to find contentment in the present moment. Accepting reality also meant acknowledging that she could not control everything, that there were things beyond her power. She couldn't change the past or undo the mistakes that had been made, but she could control how she responded to them. Isla learned that it was okay to have days where things weren't perfect, where she felt frustrated or disappointed. Those days didn't define her. What mattered was how she chose to move forward. Isla's journey toward peace was not just about forgiving William and rebuilding their relationship. It was about forgiving herself. She had carried so much guilt, wondering if she had failed in some way, if she had caused the problems in her marriage by not being enough, by not seeing the signs earlier. But as she reflected on everything that had happened, she realized that she had done the best she could with the information she had at the time. She couldn't change what had already happened, but she could change how she viewed herself moving forward. The reality was that life would always have its ups and downs. There would be setbacks, there would be growth, and there would be challenges. But Isla had learned that these things didn't have to define her happiness. Instead, they were part of the beautiful, complex fabric of life. She had learned to accept that life's imperfections were a part of what made it worth living. And so, Isla found peace within herself. She didn't need to have all the answers or to fix everything. She just needed to keep moving forward day by day, embracing the messiness and the beauty of life as it came. She had come to understand that happiness wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about learning to navigate it with grace, strength, and love. Isla's family was still a work in progress, but they had made progress. The love between her and William had been tested, but it had survived. And Isla knew, deep in her heart, that this new version of their family, imperfect, messy, and real, was one that she could be proud of. This was her family, and they were learning to love each other in a way that was stronger than before. And for the first time in a long time, Isla felt hopeful about the future. The final choice. The crucial decision. Isla sat in her study, the room bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun. Her fingers rested on the edge of her desk, her thoughts swirling in a mixture of anxiety and contemplation. It had been a long journey, filled with painful revelations and difficult choices. But now, more than ever, she faced the most important decision of her life. The decision about the future of her family and her career weighed heavily on her heart, and she knew that whatever choice she made would define the rest of her life. Her children, who had been her constant support through this turbulent time, were growing older, and Isla felt a strong pull to ensure that they had the best future possible. The love she had for them was immeasurable, and every decision she made now was for their well-being and happiness. But at the same time, Isla had always been an ambitious woman. She had spent years building her career, and now, the thought of stepping away from it completely felt like a sacrifice she wasn't sure she was ready to make. The demands of her career had always been a balancing act, but after everything that had happened with William, Isla began to realize that she needed to reassess her priorities. It was no longer just about the hustle and the success. It was about what would truly make her happy, what would bring her peace of mind, and what would give her the life she wanted for herself and her children. Her thoughts turned to her marriage and the rebuilding process that was still underway. William, though trying to change, had not been the man she needed him to be in the past. Isla had forgiven him, but she knew that forgiveness did not mean forgetfulness. She had to decide whether she could continue to invest in their relationship and family, or whether it was time to start anew, with her children as her primary focus. Isla knew she couldn't do it all. The weight of the world had often felt like it was on her shoulders. But in this moment, as she sat quietly in her study, she understood that the best decision for her family, her children especially, was the one that allowed her to stay true to herself, while still being a strong and loving mother. She didn't want her children to grow up thinking that success and material wealth were more important than love, trust, and emotional well-being. But that didn't mean she had to abandon her own dreams or sense of fulfillment. Isla realized that she could pursue her career in a way that was aligned with her family's needs. She could work to ensure a stable future for them without sacrificing her own happiness. The challenge now was to find the right balance between these two worlds. Isla's mind wandered back to her marriage again. She had always been so sure of her commitment to William, but now she wondered if their bond was strong enough to withstand everything that had happened. She wasn't sure if they could ever go back to the way things were, or if they needed to build something entirely new. What would a new beginning look like for them? How could she trust him again without the constant fear that he might betray her? These were the questions Isla had to face, and she knew she couldn't afford to make this decision hastily. It was about more than just her. It was about her children, her future, and what kind of life she wanted to create for them. The journey ahead. After days of weighing her options, Isla found clarity. The decision wasn't easy, but she had come to realize something important. Happiness couldn't be found in the past, nor could it be dictated by someone else's actions. It had to come from within. She couldn't continue living in the shadow of past mistakes and disappointments, nor could she hold herself back from the future because of fear or doubt. Isla knew that she had to carve her own path. While her marriage and her children would always be her priority, she needed to reclaim her own sense of self. Her happiness didn't depend on William's actions or the state of her marriage. It depended on her ability to move forward with her life, no matter what that looked like. In the weeks that followed, Isla began to put her plan into action. She decided to balance her career and family life, but with clear boundaries. She found that by setting limits on her work, she was able to spend more time with her children, showing them the love and support they needed. At the same time, Isla returned to her passions, enrolling in courses to further her career and learning new skills that would help her grow professionally. She realized that she didn't have to choose between being a good mother and having a fulfilling career. She could do both, and she could do them on her own terms. Isla learned that true strength came not from sacrifice, but from the ability to embrace all the aspects of herself that made her who she was: mother, career woman, and individual. Her journey wasn't without obstacles. There were days when the weight of the world felt too heavy, when her doubts crept back in, and when she questioned whether she was making the right choices. But Isla learned to trust herself. She learned to follow her intuition and make decisions that aligned with her values, even when the world around her seemed uncertain. Isla also learned that sometimes the journey isn't just about the destination. It's about the process, the growth, the change, and the transformation that happens along the way. As she rebuilt her life, she realized that she had become stronger than she had ever thought possible. She was no longer the woman who needed someone else to complete her. She had learned to stand on her own, to trust in herself, and to embrace the unknown. By the time she reached the end of this chapter in her life, Isla had come to a profound realization. Happiness wasn't about finding the perfect relationship, the perfect job, or the perfect family. It was about creating a life that felt authentic to her, one where she could grow, learn, and love herself and others with an open heart. As she looked toward the future, Isla knew there would still be challenges ahead, but she no longer feared them. She had found her strength, and with that strength, she knew she could face anything that came her way. It was a new chapter, one that she was ready to begin, fully embracing all the possibilities that lay ahead. The end and a new beginning, opening a new chapter. As the days passed, Isla found herself slowly stepping back into a life that, in some ways, felt familiar yet drastically different. The storm that had shaken her marriage, the lies, and the emotional turmoil had begun to settle, but they had left behind a much-needed sense of clarity. For the first time in years, Isla felt like she was living authentically, no longer weighed down by the secrets and fears that had once defined her life. William, too, had begun to change. He had taken responsibility for his actions, understanding the gravity of the hurt he had caused Isla. Their relationship was no longer clouded by deception or guilt. The walls that had once stood between them were gradually crumbling, allowing for a fresh start. They were not trying to recreate the past, nor were they pretending to be the couple they once were. Instead, they were building something entirely new, one rooted in trust, transparency, and the understanding that the road ahead would require continuous effort and growth. It wasn't easy, of course. Isla still carried the weight of the past, the betrayals, the hurt, the sleepless nights spent wondering if she had made the right decisions. But what had once been a relationship that teetered on the edge of collapse had transformed into something stronger, more resilient. They both knew that their relationship would not be perfect, but now they had the tools to navigate through the challenges with a newfound sense of respect for each other. Isla had learned to let go of the past and embrace the present. She no longer felt trapped by the expectations of others, nor did she feel the need to prove anything. She had faced her demons and, in doing so, had liberated herself. There was no longer any room for resentment or doubt. She had chosen to forgive not just for William's sake, but for her own. The future looked different now. Isla no longer felt like she was just surviving. She was finally living. The days ahead were uncertain, but they were hers to shape, and that thought gave her an overwhelming sense of peace. She looked at William, and though their marriage had been tested, she could see the man he was becoming, one who understood the importance of love, trust, and the hard work that relationships required. Their home, once filled with tension and secrets, was now a place of understanding and warmth. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that made all the difference. Isla and William were no longer pretending to be someone they were not. They had come to terms with their flaws and imperfections, and in doing so, they had built something stronger and more authentic. Trust and hope. As Isla stood in the kitchen one morning, preparing breakfast for her children, she took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the journey she had been through. She thought about how much she had changed since the day she first discovered the truth about William. She had been lost, unsure of herself, and now she stood with a sense of purpose, ready to face the future with confidence. She had learned to trust again not just William, but herself. She had reclaimed her own sense of worth and independence, realizing that her happiness was not dependent on anyone else's actions or approval. Isla had always placed the needs of others before her own, but now she knew that in order to truly love and care for others, she had to first love and care for herself. The pain she had endured had taught her valuable lessons. She had learned that the greatest gift she could give her children was not perfection, but the courage to be true to themselves, to make their own choices, and to never settle for anything less than the life they deserved. Isla was determined to pass on this wisdom to her children, to teach them that their worth came from within, and that love was something that had to be nurtured, not demanded. As she gazed out the kitchen window, watching the sunlight filter through the trees, Isla felt a surge of hope. The road ahead would not always be easy, but she knew she had the strength to face whatever came her way. She had already faced the most difficult challenges of her life and emerged stronger. Now, it was time to move forward, to embrace the possibilities of the future, and to continue rebuilding what had been broken. Her journey had taught her that no matter how much she had lost, there was always a chance to begin again. She had found hope in the most unexpected of places in herself, in the love she still shared with William, and in the future that lay before her. Isla had come to understand that hope wasn't about waiting for things to get better. It was about making a conscious decision to move forward one step at a time. Isla smiled to herself as she placed the last plate on the table. Her family was together. Her life was unfolding in ways she never could have imagined before. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly content. She had weathered the storm, and now, as the sun rose higher in the sky, she was ready to embrace the new day, knowing that with trust, hope, and the love of her family, she could face anything the future held. Isla and William's relationship was far from perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. They had both made mistakes, but they had also learned from them, and in doing so, they had grown stronger. The road ahead might be uncertain, but together, they knew they could navigate it with open hearts and a commitment to honesty, respect, and love. As Isla looked forward to the future, she realized that it wasn't about the past or the mistakes they had made. It was about the choices they made moving forward, the way they would continue to rebuild their lives, and the family they would continue to grow. And with that thought, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage and hope, ready to embrace the new beginning that was unfolding before her. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more gripping tales every week. We appreciate your support here at Stories TH.